What's going on, guys? It's Joe with Strictly Commerce. Inside of today's video, we're going to be going over how much money you need to start Amazon FBA in 2023, part 2.
This is amazing. Amazon FBA, behind the scenes. This is the business. Right here in the grid. Fuck it.
So if you guys started with part 1, we talked about how much money you need to get started in terms of software, seller account, as well as really the basics to get started with RA and OA. In this video, we're going to be going over how much money you really need to get started with Amazon FBA wholesale, and why this is kind of a separate video is because this is a completely different animal in terms of purchasing for Amazon FBA. With RA and OA, you're really buying small quantities of a lot of different items and you're constantly looking for new SKUs. With wholesale, it becomes more of a relationship-based business, and sometimes you have to go really deep on certain items, and that's kind of like against the overall rule that we do in terms of, go wide and not deep on different inventory. So with wholesale, it's kind of one of those things where you have to be a little bit more experienced, and getting that initial experience, I recommend starting with one of those other sourcing methods in order to just dip your feet wet and not have to go deep in order to really make money. When you start to look at wholesale accounts, we have other videos going over how to contact wholesalers, how to find wholesalers, and you can check those out. But in terms of once you actually get started and open an account, a lot of the catalogs that you look at when you're first starting out are gonna be a little bit weird, and they're gonna look like a ton of different items that you might only be able to make pennies on in the beginning. And that's the thing with wholesale, is you won't know if a wholesaler is really, really good until you place 2 or 3 different orders from them. You're not gonna be able to spend the most money on order 1. You're not even gonna be able to establish the best relationship on the first order with these wholesalers. It's gonna take time and effort and going through orders to really see if these wholesalers are somebody that you can work with on a long-term basis. So that's why I recommend you need a lot higher of a budget when starting with wholesale, and why you need to be a little bit more experienced or be willing to put the risk into different items to get started with this model compared to RA and OA. So for wholesale, I definitely recommend you get started and watch part 1 first of how much money you need to get started, and then refer back to this video, because you're gonna need to utilize all of the software and accounts that we needed in part 1, plus some more. So we're gonna need RevSeller, Keepa, your Amazon seller account, as well as Inventory Labs, and then we're gonna tack on some more for this business. You're gonna need 2D Workflow, which is a shipment software, or you're gonna need a prep center. We have a video on having your own warehouse versus utilizing a prep center also inside of our channel already. But basically, you're gonna need to take into account how much money am I gonna be spending? Do I wanna be spending money on a prep center to just send all my items to them and have those directly shipped to Amazon and just pay per unit? In the end, it's gonna cost you somewhere around $1 per unit on average to actually utilize this method. Or you can utilize your own warehouse and run the cost of how many units you would need to have your own rent and payroll and labor and insurance on your own spot, and see what makes more sense for you. I would recommend to start prep as much as you can yourself, or send it to a prep center, and then look at the warehouse piece of things as an option, because once you lock yourself into a fixed cost, you're automatically gonna have to send that many units per month in order to remain profitable. So for example, if it costs you $10,000 per month to run and operate a warehouse with labor and insurance and rent and everything like that, you're gonna need to make minimum $10,000 in profit off Amazon plus more in order to cover those expenses and cover all of your bills. So you wanna keep that in mind and keep your costs low in the beginning. You're also gonna need an LLC and an EIN and a resale certificate. Depending on your state, this is gonna be anywhere from $300 to $500, depending on your state and where you're incorporating in. And you're gonna have to have this because all of the wholesalers that you're gonna work with are B2B only, and they don't sell items to individuals ever. Also, another thing to keep in mind with wholesale compared to OA and RA is a lot of the wholesalers that you're gonna be working with are gonna have minimum order quantities. So some wholesalers will have MOQs of $500, some wholesalers will have MOQs of $2,500, some will have MOQs of $25,000 just on one specific brand. So it really depends on who you're working with as to where that will line up. You can find wholesalers that'll work with smaller orders. However, in general, you're gonna get a better price when you spend more money. And in order to build out that relationship to get better discounts, you're gonna need to spend a lot of money to get your reps' attention. So you're gonna need a bigger budget, obviously, to actually utilize this model to the best of your ability. Another thing to keep in mind with wholesale is there are gonna be times when you need to go break even on SKUs, or even lose money to get an order out, to hit that MOQ, or to, build that relationship with your rep. So you need more of a budget and have more risk tolerance to really roll with this model. And you're gonna see that you would make a lot more money spending less if you did OA and RA, because you're gonna make a higher ROI on all of your SKUs. Wholesale is the model that you really want to push volume with, and I wouldn't recommend you start with anything less than $5,000 to $10,000 if you want to jump right into wholesale. So with that being said, wholesale is a model that you really need more money to actually work with and utilize to the best of your ability. This model gets better the more you work with these vendors and have them know you by name in order to make money. The more you buy, the better you're going to do with wholesale, and you need to really be comfortable buying those items. Otherwise, it becomes a lot easier to work with, especially that you have tighter margins and volume is key. If you have to buy a ton of stuff and you're going to lose a little bit of money on it, it's obviously going to be way easier to lose money with this model compared to having a couple items that don't do so well with OA and RA. And you might lose $50 to $100, whereas in wholesale you could end up losing thousands upon thousands of dollars with a bad buy. Additionally, something that is a benefit with OA and RA, if you make a bad buy, there are ways to return your items. I don't recommend doing this because a lot of retailers, you're kind of screwing them over by buying items to resell them and then returning them back to the original retailer. However, it is a little bit of an out when you're just getting started and make bad buys that you have that outlet to get rid of items that you can't sell on Amazon. With wholesale, 99% of the time, you're basically stuck with whatever you end up buying from these wholesalers. And if it's not a good buy and you can't sell it on Amazon, you're gonna have to find somewhere else to put it. If that's eBay or Walmart or selling it in person, whatever it is, all of that just means is it's more legwork for you, which ends up being more of a loss, obviously, because your time ends up being money.
Time is money, boy.
Although there is ways to get rid of stuff and you do get better pricing and it is more legitimate, wholesale is a little bit more risky because it's a little bit harder to move stuff once you get stuck with it. And it does happen, and there are items all the time where you're not able to sell them on the original listing that you thought, or the price tanks on the listing that you bought it for, or there's a large lead time and then the price goes down. There's a ton of different variables with wholesale, so that's why you have to be careful with things like this and really know what you're doing in terms of getting into this business. And it's a lot less beginner friendly. However, it does have a lot more potential to scale. The little rule of thumb that I would go with is that OA and RA are easy to start but harder to scale. But wholesale is harder to get started with and a lot easier to scale once you get things going. So with that being said, if you have a larger budget and you want to get into wholesale, this is definitely a really good route and an extremely scalable business that you can run with. Just keep in mind that it is going to cost you more money to start, and you should be ready to invest anywhere from $5,000 to $10,000 to really make it worth your time. So that's all for today's video, and thank you for your business. I didn't look that way once. It's a good outtake.